Good evening and welcome to Chasing the Facts. I'm Sam Chase, your host, and with us this evening are Chief of Police Colin Spence and Lieutenant Jason Hanscom from the Chelmsford Police Department. And one of the things we're going to talk about this evening, among many other things, is that the police department has launched a new website. And I understand that Lieutenant Hanscom is in large part responsible for the implementation of that. Is that a correct statement?
Not really for the implementation of the website, more for the reaccreditation.
Oh, the reaccreditation. That's right. I'm sorry. I was just telling the chief and Lieutenant Hanscom that I'm 77 years old, so I get confused, you know. But that's okay. You guys can straighten me out. I'm sure you will. So what we generally do is, at the beginning of the show, we ask for just a little bit of biographical information from our guests. Anything you want to say? So we'll start with you, Chief.
So I was educated Chelmsford school system, graduated in 1989, which is a little shocking when I look back now. Oh. And really enjoyed my time at Chelmsford High School. And then I went to UMass Lowell, and then I went to Western New England College to get my master's degree. And then I got my law degree from Massachusetts School of Law. And
wow.
So throughout my career at the police department, I started out as a patrol officer. From there, became on the community response unit, which at the time, community policing would generally be a unit. Mm-hmm. That has now changed. The whole department practices community policing. It's ingrained in our department. I'll talk a little bit more about that in the community engagement aspect today. Then I was a detective in the drug unit for about 4 years. Then I was promoted to sergeant, and then I was assigned to the district attorney's office as a sergeant, mm-hmm. as a police prosecutor. Then promoted to lieutenant as a police prosecutor, then deputy chief, and then chief about 9 months ago, almost 10 months ago.
Well, that's quite a background, and you truly have pretty much done just about all the jobs in the department. So I think that's a very good path progression to become chief. So that's great. And Jason, what about you?
Like Chief Spence, I'm from Chelmsford, educated in Chelmsford schools, class of 1995, a little bit younger. Came on the job in 2004, patrol officer, sergeant, lieutenant in 2017. Been in patrol my entire career, and as Chief Spence alluded to, I'm the accreditation manager, so I handle the reaccreditation of the department every 3 years through the Mass Police Accreditation Commission.
And that's quite an undertaking, isn't it? When I was in my corporate life many years ago, we went through an ISO certification, or registration, I guess they called it. And I remember when you guys started up that process, I looked back and I thought, boy, that's pretty much the same thing, where you have to, identify all of the processes in your department and develop, the right procedures and the standards and so forth. So that's quite an undertaking.
Yeah, there's about 300 standards that are mandatory and almost 100 more that are optionals, and it touches every area of the department. There's nothing that it doesn't delve into.
Now, is this a requirement that all the departments do this, or is this an optional thing that you can choose to do?
It's voluntary. So many years ago, we started, and I believe it was Chief Murphy started the process. Mm-hmm. And we have proceeded every 3 years. We get reaccredited, and it makes sure that we're following the best practices in policing, and make sure our policies are always constantly updated. Mm-hmm. And that's why Jason, Lieutenant Hanscom, is so important as far as making sure that our policies are correct, that officers are reviewing them, so on and so forth.
I think it's great, and I think it certainly gives the public a lot of reassurance that you guys are constantly looking at your operations and trying to make sure that you stay current with all of the things that you have to be current with, and that it almost sounds like a program of continuous improvement, if nothing else. And I think that should give the community a lot of assurance about the quality of our police services that we're getting. And we'll get into that a little bit more, and we do want to obviously spend some time on the website, but I want to read you guys a thing here which I found. And again, I was brought up in the 1950s, okay, so that's my frame of reference. And I found something from the Concord, Mass. Oral History. And this is a retired police lieutenant from the Concord Police Force, Paul Landini, and I actually knew Lieutenant Landini. He was a pretty good guy. And he says, I was with the police force for 22 years. When I first got on the force, there was actually no training. I went down They gave me a pair of pants, some shirts, and a gun, and that was it. I went right to work. I went right to work with no training other than my military training, and I walked the beat. Okay, so that's our starting point. That's 1954. So how have we evolved from that point?
Well, as far as training, one of the things that when I took over as chief, we reorganized the department, for those that don't know. So we basically started a traffic and training division, and there is a sergeant that is in charge of that, Sergeant Zeminski, who handles all of our training. He makes sure that we're up to the most current. Use of force is obviously a very important part of what we do, unfortunately, and we want to make sure we're doing things right, that officers are using force when they should be using it and not de-escalating when they should be de-escalating. It's a huge liability for any city or town if officers act inappropriately. Now, the one thing that we are blessed with the training that we have, Sergeant Zeminski is extremely well trained. He's a member of the SWAT team, which is a Nemlik Regional SWAT team. So he has all that upper training to really bring it back to our department and make sure that we're trained in the best practices as far as that goes. But also, as part of our training, we do in-service training. A lot of what we do, mental health, is a huge issue in town, in all communities across Massachusetts. And in our mental health training, approximately 85% of our department has a 40-hour course just in it's critical incident, CIT training, critical incident training. And it's to deal with people that are in crisis. And that it's extremely important because years ago, how we would treat when we weren't trained, we would just take somebody, if they were having a mental health issue, we would either arrest the person, bring them straight to the hospital. Well, in a lot of situations, if we arrest somebody and they're having a mental health issue, say they commit a crime, but it's a result of their mental health, we're putting them in a cell. That is not what we want to do. That's probably the worst place we could bring somebody. So right now, currently in Chelmsford, we have a full-time clinician. In a lot of situations, if somebody is having a mental health crisis, she will go to that call with an officer. And it offers us different ways of handling that situation. And a lot of times, she can have, get the person bed in a mental health facility, substance abuse facility, and that assists us greatly, but also the person, and that's what it's all about. It's assisting members of the public that years ago were almost forgotten. They would be arrested and released, and they never really got the treatment they needed. And that's one of the things that we've changed. And a lot of that has to do with the advanced training we have. There's certain mandated trainings that we have that the state mandates every year that every officer has to go through across the Commonwealth. It could be officer wellness is another big issue that we have. We want to make sure our officers are healthy because a healthy officer is going to act differently on the street. If we have somebody that is having their own issues, that could transmit to their actions on the street. So we want to make sure that we're looking out for that officer's mental health also. So it really, policing has changed significantly. And a lot of it is the education of our officers now too. A lot of our officers have advanced degrees, which is extremely helpful because you have the life experience that maybe it isn't, that I keep saying we're getting away from arrest because we really are. We're trying to, that's as a last resort now. If we can get that person the help they need, then it's a win-win for everyone.
Well, it seems to me, from what you describe, it's more of a proactive approach. Get in before the situation gets to the point where you have to make an arrest or you have to use force or whatever it happens to be. I mean, that seems to be the goal, more of a proactive approach. Does that?
Yes, I think it's
right?
preventing.
Preventing, that's probably the word I was looking for, right?
We're trying to prevent if we can get the person the help, maybe we're not dealing with this person for the next 10 years. If they get the help they need, get the medications they need. But years ago, that was not done. And I think that the training now of police officers is so much higher than it used to be. And I had heard those stories when I came on, that they just got badges, guns, and a law book. And that is all they got. And there wasn't any training. So it doesn't surprise me when you read that because I had heard that when I first started.
I would say, my father was in law enforcement, and I would say that when I was a kid, probably half the police on the department were not high school graduates. okay? 10th grade.
Yeah.
A lot of them were World War II veterans that jumped in when they were 17, you know, back in the early 40s, and then they never went back to high school and that kind of thing. But it wasn't considered important. But now, the education is considered very important. And I would guess that it puts you on a more level playing field with the population at large. If you've got a well-educated population, then you want your police officer to be
Absolutely.
educated at least to that standard.
I would say most of our officers now have master's degrees.
Master's
minimum bachelor's
degrees.
But a lot of our officers have advanced degrees, whether it be a law degree, master's degree like I have, or minimum bachelor's degrees, the vast majority.
Yeah.
Yeah, so folks, this isn't your father's police department anymore, right? This isn't 1955, you know, that's for sure.
It's definitely changed. I mean, we've been blessed in this town that we have an outstanding group of officers. We
Oh, I
really
think
do.
so, yeah.
Just looking in a lot of that has to do with community support also, though. I mean, our community supports our police department. I've been around through, you know, obviously we had a lot of unrest several years ago, but this town always supported the police. And that's one of the things that support's been earned by those officers over the course of decades and working together with the community. And that's one of the things, like one of the new divisions we also have a community engagement and wellness division, which we started January 1st. And that is to get officers out in the community more. I'm sure you've probably seen we do coffee with a cop.
Yes.
In the fall, we're going to be having an open house at the police station, community resource dog. There's a lot of different things that we've done that started under Chief Spinney and that I've continued and tried to put my own face on it, for lack of a better term.
Right.
But as far as how we're going to get out there more in the community. And that's one of the reasons why the website was done also.
Well, the officers, today we look at it in terms of the officer as approachable, whereas maybe 30 or 40 years ago we tried to stay away from a police officer if we saw him on the street. You know, don't do that, you know, you might get into trouble kind of thing. And now, I mean, I could see Jason in the store and we'd go up and have a conversation, and you know, that's the way it ought to be, I think. Yeah. You know, at least that makes me more comfortable anyway.
I think it only helps all of us.
Oh, I agree with you. What do you think the top issues we have in Chelmsford relative to law enforcement are?
Well, I think probably the top complaint we have in town would be traffic. As everybody sees, I mean, as far as the speed of vehicles, people on their phones, texting, things along those lines. So that's probably the number one complaint we have. And, you know, we have a lot of businesses in town, so people are trying to get to work, and we just try to get people to slow down. So that's probably the top complaint we have. Other issues that we're dealing with a significant amount of, mental health is definitely near the top as far as what we're dealing with. And a lot of that has to do with what everybody's experienced over the last 3 or 4 years between COVID, all these different issues. The other would be substance abuse issues, which sometimes is interrelated with the mental health issues. And we're trying to get a grasp on that as far as how we're going to address that issue. Homelessness, I'm sure you've seen there's a large homeless population now, whether in our hotels or in different wooded areas around town. And that's something that we have to provide support to them, especially in the cold weather. And we actually have a very good relationship with our homeless population. And we actually go, if it's going to be a cold night, we actually will normally seek out to see if anybody needs anything. So it's not like years ago we would take more aggressive action.
Right.
And that is not, obviously people are struggling, and we try to address those struggles as we go as a police department.
And that's great, and I think there's a much better or greater appreciation that the general public has with regard to that. I mean, I know I look at these things and I say, there but for the grace of God go I, and a lot of people are one or two paychecks away from that situation. And I think folks have a better understanding of that today than they might have 25 or 30 years ago.
Absolutely.
So we look at that situation a lot differently. It's very frustrating to me that, you know, we live in a, as countries go, as we look at other countries in the world, we're a pretty well-off country. It's depressing to me that we can't seem to assure people that they have a place to stay and food, okay? I mean, these are basics.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the answer is, but I think the way the police are handling it, especially in Chelmsford, I think you guys are doing the right thing. I mean, you know, they're members of the community, and you have to do a certain amount of outreach and make sure that they're doing all right, you know, whatever their situation is. And for whatever reason, they are where they are, and it's really not for us to make that judgment. It's to make
Exactly.
sure that they're okay, all right, and they're able to live their lives. So I think that is exactly the right approach. So one thing I hear, and we'll get into the website in a minute, but I have, as you know, a couple of questions here. But I hear a lot about the difference between being a police officer in a large urban environment as opposed to a suburban environment, as opposed to a rural environment. And I guess I know enough about it to know that you can get yourself into trouble in Dunstable just as easily as you can in Boston. But do you want to talk a little bit about that? Maybe some of the differences of policing urban versus suburban and rural.
I would say probably the number one difference between an urban environment and a suburban environment is the community engagement portion, as far as community policing itself. A suburban environment, especially now, an urban environment, especially now, with the shortages in policing, which we're experiencing, a lot of their calls for service, they're going call to call to call. They're extremely busy. They're only dealing with the bad situations. And the community, true community
They're
policing
kind of doing
is not
triage type thing.
exactly,
Right.
exactly. But a suburban police department, much like Chelmsford is, I feel that we're more into the community policing, into the community, attending the different athletic events, attending different events in town. One of my favorite things to do every week is a veterans breakfast, every month.
Yes.
Last Thursday of the month. It's one of my favorite things to do because you're there, you're out, people come up and ask you questions, and it's more of a positive outreach.
And that's a very well-attended event, too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we 2 months ago, we brought the community resource dog, Ozzy, who's one of our best employees, most loved by the public, but we brought Ozzy to that event. And a lot of the veterans that were there came up to me and were talking to me like, we would never have thought that we would have seen the day that there's a dog for comfort at the police department.
There you go.
But
it works.
Oh, it is a great resource for us. It is a great resource because everybody loves a dog. And they come right up to the dog, they pet the dog. Well, most people love it.
Yes, right.
And he's a very friendly dog.
Oh, yeah.
And it's one of those things, I think that is probably the number one difference between urban and suburban. And I think we have a lot of buy-in in this town. Our offices, a lot of our offices live in this town. And
Yes, that's a good
from,
thing.
Yeah, from this town. And we're going through hiring right now of a lot of town residents. Now,
so when you do the hiring, I mean, what do you look for? Are there certain things that you look for that would give an individual an advantage? Like, is it an advantage for them to be from the town? We know that if you're a veteran, you get some points on the civil service exam. What do you look for?
so how the process generally works, once you obtain your high school diploma, when you take the civil service exam, that's the first step. You have to take that exam first, and then you get ranked. In residents, how it works in Chelmsford, residents are called first based on what they received on the exam. And then we just proceed right down that list. We do a full background check. We do full interview, physical. There's fitness standards that they have to be able to pass. And that's how we start the process. And then once they go through all of that, if they pass all of those things, then they go to the police academy, which is approximately 26 weeks. And we actually have 2 new police officers, Officer Lucas and Officer Buxton, Michael Buxton, that began with us last week. So Haley Lucas and Michael Buxton just finished the academy. And we have another officer graduating next Friday.
Officer Buxton is a lateral, isn't he?
He's a lateral,
Yeah.
yes. Yep.
That's a good deal for the department if you can get somebody who's already got some experience, I would think.
Yes, because
Yeah.
we don't have to train the person for 26 weeks. And the field training is generally shorter. So when they finish the police academy and they start with the police department, then they go through 12 weeks of field training, where they're in the police station. They usually ride with the police officer during the shift, and they learn the inner workings of the police department. And that's generally about 12 weeks, and then they are out working on.
So it's really, it's almost like a 9-month period before they're allowed really to operate on their own.
At least.
So that's a long way from they gave me a pair of pants, some shirts, and a gun, and that was it.
Yes, absolutely.
He didn't say if they gave him any bullets, but I'm sure he got 6 anyway. Yeah, it's just amazing. You know, really, it hasn't been that long, 1954, 55 to now, and it's the changes in the police department and the methodology and everything. I mean, even the notion that you seek some sort of an accreditation status. I mean, that was just unheard of, even, I would think, 30 years ago, if anybody had suggested that you needed to go through any kind of a thing like that. But
I think you're going to see it start to become the normal.
I
it's
think
going to be
so.
almost required at some point that there's so many agencies that are in the process that are trying to do it. And it's a long process. You have to go through every policy you have. You have to find every best practice. I mean, it was retired Deputy Ahern who started when he was lieutenant under Chief Murphy, and it took him several years to actually get us to a point where we could apply to be certified, which is the first step, and then later accredited. That's the hard part. The maintaining takes some work, but for an agency to actually go into this, you have to show a real commitment to wanting to do things best practice, wanting to do things the right way, and making sure that everything's by the book.
And they come in and to get the accreditation, I mean, you must go through an audit process once you've set that whole situation up, right?
So a facilitator from the Accreditation Commission comes in with 3 to 4 assessors who are also police officers trained to do assessments at other agencies. And they go through every standard, every folder, and do a tour of the facility and make sure that we meet the standards or we don't pass.
Pretty tough. But you want it to be tough.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I can't remember. Did I ask you this? If I didn't, I'll ask it again. What percentage of agencies within Massachusetts have this accreditation?
I'm going to say fully accredited, maybe 30%.
Wow.
There are some more that are certified.
Right.
Maybe higher, maybe closer to 40.
Now this is apart from the requirement that a police officer be certified. I know that's something that's relatively new as well.
Yes, the post-certification.
How does that work for a police officer?
So basically, what POST is, it's a state agency that oversees what we do. So it oversees the whole police department as far as an agency itself, and then every officer. And what POST does, when it basically started approximately 2.5 years ago, we have to submit all of our internal affairs records for officers accused of wrongdoing. Now, we are fortunate in the town of Chelmsford. We very rarely... Very few. But some larger cities and everything else, it takes a little bit. And I have to basically do a form that says a person's moral character as far as what I've dealt with, what our records have in them, that they're morally can be a police officer.
Okay.
And then I send that into the state along with any civilian complaints, internal affairs, anything sustained, and the state looks at them and says, well, yes, this was the right penalty, or no, this person is not going to be certified. And the fortunate thing for our town, we really have very few negative interactions.
That does not surprise me. Well, we've got about 5 minutes, so let's do the website. So,
Okay,
Vilu, do your magic, and the chief can walk us through the. We have a brand new website which was put up, what, 2 weeks ago?
About 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
it released.
Okay. I remember there was an article in the Lowell Sun on the 17th of this month. So if people want to go back in their archives and read about that, they can. But go ahead.
Okay, so basically this website that we have been working on, we're still adding a few things to it, but if you go up to the About tab.
Look at this. Isn't this wonderful that they can do this?
And that basically goes into what accreditation is. The Chief's Corner is a statement that that I made. And then we have the department roster, which is next.
Great picture.
And the department roster is important because you can email any officer right off of this.
Okay, so they have their email address right on the.
Yep.
That's great.
And that's one of the things that is extremely important as far as members of the public might deal with somebody to call and forget what their email address was, so on and so forth. And it has everything, our accounts payable, all our employees that we have at the police department, which we have approximately 70 employees currently, are all listed here, including animal control. Now, if we go back up to the...
And their functions.
In their functions.
So we can find out that Jason's a lieutenant and so-and-so is a patrol officer and so forth. Okay.
So if we go back to the about again, we also have a department history that we're still working on. I believe it is almost to 1980. And it gives a timeline as far as the Chelmsford Police Department, how we came to be, what has happened. We're still working on getting more information, and we'll be updating this on a regular basis. Now, if we can go back to the top, no, I'm going through it fairly quickly in the interest of time. One big thing that's on here is our policies and procedures. So if you go down to policies, it has every policy with the exception of a few that are safety, like school incidents and things along those lines. But one of the big things that we have when there was a report done when President Obama was president, he did a report, had a report done by a group of law enforcement officials. And one of the things that they recommended was that all policies from police departments have to be accessible in the interest of transparency.
Here you go.
So that's why, one of the reasons why we put them on there. Now, if we can go back up to the top. And if you go to units and divisions, the next tab over, and this has all our units and divisions that we have at the police department. You don't have to click on any of them, but it just shows animal control, behavioral health, community engagement, wellness, all the court prosecutor's office, and it goes into what each one does, what the function is. Then if you go to community, those are just some tabs to the various things. CPAL, we just redid that website also, which is basically the Chelmsford Police Athletic League. Community resource dog, if you want to request the dog, if you want to reserve a room at the police department, we have a tab for that. And then we have different resources, which is the next tab. And that just goes into various external resources you can contact, DPW, Board of Health. If you go to forms, this goes into the different forms that we have. And then we also have, through the Forms tab, you can file an online report, which is extremely important.
That's great.
For people that are homebound. They can do their reports right to the police department through here. And then we have various permits on the next tab. And then news, which basically our social media, which is extremely active. It goes into all of our news feeds. And you can see it at one location.
Fantastic.
The last thing I just wanted to mention very quickly, you can also sign up through here for email alerts. So people that don't have social media that would like email alerts directly from the police department, from the home page, if you go down to the bottom, you can sign up for the email alerts. Oh, I think it's a little high.
Well, that is great, and it's a tremendous resource, and I imagine quite a bit of effort went into that.
Yes, it was. Officer Aidan Gillis did an excellent job.
I would say so, and is continuing to go into that. So, folks, there's no excuse for not communicating with our police officers. You just saw it. So, gentlemen, we're out of time, and thank you very much for coming on, and we'll have you on again, because there are other things that we didn't get to.